Hey you guys, my name's Jeff. Welcome to the channel. I made a video about VTI. Everybody's heard of this ETF by now, and then I fell asleep. And I had uploaded it to YouTube. And then when I woke up in the morning, I got this comment on the video, and it goes something exactly like this. Can you do a video on METV? I like VTI, but I haven't started buying it yet because I buy Amazon, Google, Tesla, Nvidia, Microsoft, and crypto. So I read that and I thought, could I do a video on METV? Well, that wouldn't be very easy because I have never heard of this ETF. But rather than be super lazy and write back like, hey, thanks dude, but maybe someday later, I thought, well, why don't we read a little, learn a little, click around, scroll, and get enough info and make a video. So that's what I'm doing here for you guys today. And I have to say, from my research on this particular ETF, I found one really good pro and one massively horrible con. I am going to share with you what I think is good about this particular ETF, METV, but I'm also going to tell you about a silent killer in this particular ETF. And if you are thinking of investing in it, which is maybe why you came across this video, then at least this will give you something to think about, because I want you to be smarter. I want to help you to build your investment education here, and what better way than to start right here. An ETF is a shopping list. It's like a bunch of stuff written on a piece of paper, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and this list is a list of stocks. And the way that an authorized participant creates an ETF, and an authorized participant is a market maker. It's someone who works at a financial institution like a brokerage firm, and their job is to go and buy all the stocks that are on the shopping list to create the ETF. And it's a pretty, complicated process, but there's creations and redemptions, and the whole end result of this is you have a list of stocks. So what's really cool about, this is the pro, all right, about this particular fund, is that it invests in all of the stocks which this particular fund provider thinks are metaverse stocks, right? So, we've all heard about Zuckerberg and the metaverse. Well, these are all stocks that in some way or other are connected to or contribute to the growth of the metaverse. And I guess the thought here is that if you invest in this particular ETF, you've got exposure to all the different companies, or many of the different companies that are involved in it. And here is a fun fact about METV. This ETF used to be called META, Meta, right? For metaverse. And about a year ago, they changed their name to METV. And this is because, you've probably already figured it out, Facebook changed their name to Meta. And they bought the ticker symbol META, and they bought the name from the ETF company, so the ETF company changed their name. Let's take a look at the holdings, because you gotta know what this ETF holds, what is on the shopping list. The top holdings of the METV ETF. So coming in at number 1 is Roblox. And you guys have probably heard of this, but it's a game company, and this particular stock makes up 9.32% of this ETF. And this is as of October 31st, 2022. So Roblox is 9.32%. So that's a very large number 1 holding. Now, the second holding in this particular ETF, number 2, is Nvidia. This is the manufacturer of GPUs, or graphics processing units, and this makes up 9.03% of this ETF. Now, the number 3 holding in METV is Apple, all right? We all know Apple, so I don't have to tell you what Apple is all about, unless you guys have been hiding or living on an island away from civilization for a couple of decades. Apple is 8.79% Well, this is fascinating. Basically because the top 3 holdings are all 9%, and that's a very concentrated ETF. Oftentimes ETFs will have, like, the top positions will have 3% or 4% of the whole ETF, but here you've got 999, we've got 27% of the fund in just the top 3 holdings, and this is good to know about. This is actually valuable information for you because it will really help you to understand this ETF and some of the pros and also the cons of holding it. All right, the number 4 position, I should probably put a heading, right? We should probably do this. METV. Just so that we know we're talking about, I know it's pretty small up there, but METV, we know which ETF we're talking about. Okay, the number 4 is Microsoft. And the percent of that is 6.19% of the holdings. And the 5th, last but not least, holding in this particular ETF is going to be, oh, this is just so meta. It's actually Meta. How about that? You love that. The 5th holding of METV is META. All right, and the percent is 4.97%, basically 5%. Now, these right here make up 9, 18, 27, 33, 38% of the portfolio in those 5 stocks. Okay, so let's take a look at the 1-year return for METV. And if we take a look at that, what we're going to find is that this ETF has lost more than 50% over the last year. Now, this is a problem for investors because, let's take an example. If you had $100 invested in METV 1 year ago, today it would be worth about $50. Now, for you to get back to 100, your $50 would have to increase by 100%, because 100% of 50 is 50. So to get back, you'd have to get 100% return. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Some of the stocks in this portfolio that have come down 50%, they're not going back. Some of these companies might not even exist in a few years. The pros are that you get this shopping list that I mentioned at the beginning. So you don't have to go out and do research into all the different stocks that are somehow connected or could be interpreted as being part of the metaverse. If you don't have the time and if you don't have the interest or the inclination, then I think, it makes a lot of sense. You could buy shares of this ETF and be done with it, all right? And people do this. Obviously, there are a lot of investors in this particular ETF. But, when we looked at that list earlier of the top 5, what we're realizing is that you could actually invest in those 5 stocks at no cost. There's no commission. There would be no ongoing year-to-year expense in buying and holding those stocks, those top 5 stocks, which were Roblox, Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, and Meta. But when you buy shares of an ETF, you pay an expense ratio, otherwise known as the ER, and you'll see that particular number expressed as a decimal. And for this particular ETF, it's 0.59% of all of the assets that you invest with them. And this is the silent killer that I was talking about. And when I say silent killer, what I mean is it's going to be killing the returns that you could be earning in your own account, in your own, whether it's a IRA, your Roth IRA, or your regular investment account. Those gains that rightfully belong to you as a stockholder are actually being diverted over to the company that has made that shopping list and that maintains the ETF portfolio. Now, again, if you're lazy and you don't want to spend all the time, I get that. I invest in ETFs, it's because I don't want to invest in, 4,000 different companies to get a diversified portfolio. But this particular ETF is very concentrated. And seeing that the top 5 holdings are having the largest influence on the returns of this particular ETF, I think it could make a lot of sense for some investors to just buy those stocks in their own portfolio, in their own investing accounts, and not have to pay this ongoing fee. Now, let me tell you, I know I use the word silent killer. It sounds really shocking. I don't know everything, but I do know something about expense ratios, and that's what I'm going to teach you about. And I think you should understand expense ratios before you ever invest. So what I've done is I found a website. I'm going to put a link to it, all right, in the description, but it allows you to compare 2 ETFs with varying expense ratios and see what the difference would be after a certain amount of time has elapsed, so that you can compare and figure out what the expenses are for that particular ETF. So what I did was I went ahead and I compared METV to VTI, just in terms of figuring out the expense differences, okay? So METV charges 0.59%, that's the expense ratio, and VTI charges 0.03. So here are the assumptions. Let's pretend you started with, or assume that you've started with $10,000. You had that big chunk to invest. And then every month you add $100 to your account, okay? So after a year, that would be 100 times 12, so it'd be $1,200. And we're going to assume a return of 13.06%. I know that seems a little bit high, but what it is it's the annual average return from 2002 until 2022. It's the last 20 years. It happens to be a very high return, but we're just going to go with it for the sake of this comparison. So here's what METV would cost you with that $10,000 investment, $1,200 every year after 20 years. It would cost you $18,077.29. For comparison, VTI would charge you $959.03. All right? The difference is you would pay an extra $17,118.26 to METV. That would be money going to the ETF company just for the simple job of managing and running that shopping list of stocks and making sure that that stock shopping list was updated with whichever stocks they felt would best reflect the metaverse. So that is the difference in the expenses that are paid. And those are money that, like I said, could go into your pocket after 20 years. Now, this is where it gets really impressive. If we look out 30 years, okay, METV would charge $96,448.51 in expenses, all right? VTI would charge $5,234.47. So the difference is $91,214.05. That's a lot of money. And that is the kind of effect that compounding has on small amounts of money over long periods of time. So what you have to do is figure out if you are comfortable or happy with paying that kind of money to an ETF company to buy those stocks for you. Now, personally, if the ETF company makes a very difficult job much easier, I think it's well worth it to pay for the ETF. You know, if the expense ratio basically makes it such that it's a nice convenience and I don't mind paying it. With VTI, you can invest in more than 4,000 different companies for the very low expense ratio of 0.03. That is, in my opinion, a very good deal. But when it gets to buying an ETF that has 47 stocks in it, and like we saw earlier, the top 5 holdings make up 38%. So if it were me, I would personally rather buy those largest holdings and hold them in my brokerage account at absolutely zero cost. As long as you don't sell and make transactions and generate taxes, for example, there's no ongoing expense ratio that you're paying to a company so that you can hold those stocks. So I think this is a real important lesson for anybody who's starting out as an investor, is to look at that expense ratio. Now, I will point something out. I will say that comparing METV to VTI is not a fair comparison, because VTI is a very well diversified ETF, invests in large caps, small caps, and mid-cap companies all throughout the US. And METV is essentially a tech stock ETF, because most of the holdings are either in the tech or the communications field. So I think a better comparison with METV would be VGT, which is the Vanguard Information Technology ETF. And the reason that I mention that is top holdings in VGT are stocks like Nvidia, Apple, and Microsoft, which happen to be the top holdings of METV. They just happen to be, quote, metaverse stocks. So you can get an ETF that holds those tech stocks, namely VGT, but the expense ratio for VGT is just 0.10. So if you look at that comparison, okay, if you look at the difference in expenses, if you made that $10,000 investment and added $100 every month, over 20 years with METV, you would be spending $18,077.29. But with VGT, you'd be getting, like I said, some of those same stocks like Apple and Microsoft and Nvidia, $3,179.77. The difference is $14,897.52. So think about that. These are kind of an apples to apples comparison. They're both tech stocks. They're in many cases the same stocks, but you're paying $14,897.52 because it's marketed and sold to you as a metaverse ETF, METV. Now, where it really gets intense is when you go out to the 30-year time frame, where you're paying METV $96,448.51 just as an expense. That's from your account to their account. With VGT, you would be paying $17,305.33. And the difference between those two is $79,143.18. So what do I think about this? Well, I think it's interesting, and I like looking at the list of holdings of METV, because if I were a tech investor, which I'm not, but I'm really interested in tech stocks, I would want to know which companies are participating in the, quote, metaverse, right? And I might, if I were real interested, create my own shopping list of stocks that I would like to invest in. Now, whether I'd actually buy them or not, just make the list. Maybe I would watch them and learn more about the companies. But, some of you may be more, into actually buying stocks. And if you were to do that, I could see making your own little metaverse ETF yourself, but knowing and having the confidence that now, once you've bought those stocks, whether you bought 5 of them or 10 or 20 or whatever, that you could hold those and just sit around and do nothing for 20 years or 30 years, and you would not get charged thousands and thousands of dollars just by being a buy and hold investor. And if you wanted, you could sell stocks and things, but then you get involved in more of an active portfolio management. And I just think it's worth knowing about. So that's kind of my take-home message for you guys is take a look at the expenses. I especially recommend taking a look. What I did was I just did a Google search for ETF expense calculator, and there are several listed, and I just tried the first 3 or 4, and I found all of them to be pretty similar in the kind of numbers that they generated, which they should be relatively close. But I particularly like the one where you could compare two ETFs with different expense ratios and just see what the difference was in the expenses. So I'm going to put a link to that in the description if any of you guys want to try it out yourself. And I'm glad to the person who asked me to share some info or some ideas about METV, because when I woke up this morning, I didn't know anything about this ETF, but I like the challenge, even though it gave me a little extra homework, and sometimes I'm feeling a little lazy and I don't really want to go out and make a new video, but sometimes you need somebody to give you a little push forward, a little encouragement to try something new, and I'm really glad that you asked about this. So if any of you are watching this, I'm very interested in which ETFs you invest in. So please just, down in the comment section, write down the ticker symbol of any ETFs that you're either invested in now, or maybe you're thinking about investing in the future. And if there's anything you'd like me to make a video about, I'm gonna regret asking for this or offering it, but if there's something you'd like to know more about, let me know in the comments and I'll take a look. And if I feel like I have a shot at giving a decent explanation or interpretation of the ETF, I would be happy to do that for you guys. So thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. And if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. That's my thumb. Give it a thumbs up. And if you have not yet subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit the little subscribe button and you will get a heads up if you hit the notification bell whenever I make a new video. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.